In the very heart of Louisiana, among the swampy waters of Bayou Teche, where the haze hangs thicker in the air than prayers at a funeral, and where moss drapes from the trees like the heavy reproaches of ancestors, there lived a story that never made it into any official record. A story of a woman whose hands wove not only fabric, but fate. Her name was Amara, and the place where she lost everything was called the St. Marin Plantation. On that patch of earth in the year 1850, where cotton bloomed whiter than the faces of those who owned it, something happened that silenced even the cries of swamp birds for many nights. The St. Marin Plantation sat deep in the southern reaches of Louisiana, 30 miles from New Orleans. The land there was rich, damp, tangled with cane and marsh grass, where frogs croaked like mourners at a funeral. The house, a white mansion with tall columns and a wraparound porch, was buried in magnolias and a poisonous kind of peace. The mistress of the estate was Madame Eugenie St. Marin, a woman with the face of a porcelain statue and eyes that reflected only her own pride. Her son, Thibault St. Marin, had just returned from his studies in Virginia, young, perfumed, and wearing a smile thinner than the edge of a blade. And among the enslaved, in the far wing of the weaving workshop, lived Amara, quiet, deft, with eyes the color of scorched earth. Her mother had been called Mamiri, and she had taught Amara to see patterns, not just in fabric, but in fate. Every stitch is a word, child, and together they make a spell, Mamiri used to say. When her mother died from fever, Amara took her place. Her fabrics became known far beyond the borders of the plantation. Even Madame Eugenie commissioned her embroidery for receptions and balls. The weaving workshop on the plantation ran like clockwork. Dozens of girls sat at the looms. Amara didn't just weave, she taught. She was strict but fair. She commanded respect. Even the overseers kept their distance, not out of kindness, but out of fear. Her silence was louder than any scream. Thibault sometimes dropped by the workshop, at first as if out of curiosity, then with darker intentions. He treated the girls like objects, things to touch, break, discard. Amara saw how her charges, especially the young ones like Zélie or Clara, froze when he appeared. Once, Zélie disappeared for 2 days. When she returned, her skin was bruised and her eyes carried silence. Amara didn't ask a single question. She already knew. Spring in Louisiana is treacherous. First, the gardenias bloom, Then come the thunderstorms. On one such night, something happened on the plantation that no one dared speak of aloud afterward. Amara's daughter, Lily, a 10-year-old girl, vanished. She was found only at dawn, at the edge of the swamp, without a sign of life. Her dress torn, traces of blood, and the ribbon Amara had woven into her braid now hung on a nearby branch. Thibault didn't show up for several days, and when he did, he was drunk and irritated, as if flies were tormenting his every breath. Madame Eugenie called the incident a tragic accident. She said, "The child went to the swamp on her own, just like all of you, when given too much freedom." Amara said nothing, but that very evening she took from the chest an old loom, Ma Miri's loom, with runes carved on its sides. And for the first time in many years, she began to weave not fabric, but a curse. Amara, every evening when the swamps began to breathe mist and fireflies filled the air like forgotten souls, Amara sat at the loom. But now she wove not for dresses or tablecloths. She intertwined patterns that held no beauty, only intent. Thin silk threads, dyed in ashen and crimson hues, formed symbols not taught on plantations and never printed in books. These were the signs of ancestors, ritual patterns of the Fon people brought from the coast of Benin. Ma Miri had known them. And now Amara knew them too. At first glance, just patterns, but in every stitch was a will. Every design, a plea, or perhaps a command. She gathered herbs from the swamps, dried inks made from seeds, dust from tombstones, all so the fabric would breathe hatred and memory. At first, everything went as usual. Thibault laughed, rode horseback, looked into the eyes of the slaves, clicked his tongue in irritation. But a month after Lily's death, he suddenly began to itch. First, his palms, then his neck. Within days, his skin broke out in a rash. Doctors from New Orleans shrugged helplessly. Allergy, nervous disorder, maybe heat stroke. But the itching worsened. He woke at night screaming, scratching his skin until it bled. And a week later, he started seeing dreams. I see patterns. It's like the walls of the room are covered in fabric, and that fabric breathes. Then faces come out of it. A girl. She's silent, but her eyes burn. Madame Eugenie ordered a crucifix hung above her son's bed and called a priest. But Thibault began to avoid mirrors. One day, passing by the weaving room, he fainted, seeing Amara weaving a new pattern. Amara kept living as usual. She prepared fabrics, taught the girls, nodded at the overseers. But those who were observant noticed threads started disappearing in the workshop. Herbs, knots, small items went missing. In the slave village, whispers spread that Amara was talking to the swamp. One night, Zili, the same girl who vanished after Thibaut's visit, saw Amara standing knee-deep in water. Around her, 7 snakes, not attacking, but winding like bracelets around her legs. Amara was singing. No words, no voice, just singing. Zili told no one. But from that night, she began helping Amara, drying herbs, mixing powders into dyes, memorizing the patterns. In March of 1851, Madame Eugenie decided to host a charity ball. The occasion was Thibaut's 20th birthday, but in reality, to show the neighbors that the St. Marne plantation was thriving despite all the little tragedies. They prepared for 3 weeks. Guests were expected from Baton Rouge, Lafayette, even from New Orleans itself. Dresses were sewn, ribbons ironed, slaves exhausted from the labor. And Amara, she wove a single piece of cloth, a gift for the ball, for the hall. It was a coverlet that Madame planned to hang behind Thibaut's chair, huge like a banner. On it, patterns resembling flowers, spirals, angel wings. But the longer you looked, the clearer it became. Those were faces, faces of children, women, eye sockets without pupils, mouths without smiles. Zali asked, "Is it death?" Amara replied, "No, it's a mirror." The ball began as expected. Violins, candles, young ladies with ribbons, heavy perfumes, and talks about sugar and cotton prices. Thibaut, in a white tailcoat, sat in his chair. Behind him, the fabric Amara had woven. Everything went smoothly until one of the guests, a planter from St. Francisville, suddenly screamed and fainted. Then 2 more followed. Everyone stared at the coverlet. In its pattern, faces stirred. No, they didn't stir, but it seemed as if they were changing, as if the cloth was breathing. Then someone whispered, It's watching us." The candles flickered. One of the mirrors cracked. Thibaut jumped up, ran to the fabric, tried to tear it down. But at that moment, his body arched, as if electricity ran through him. He screamed fell to the floor and began clawing at the skin on his chest, shouting, "Get it out! It's here! It's inside me!" Panic erupted in the crowd. People ran, ladies fainted, horses broke free from the stables, and Amara stood on the stairs in the shadows with an expression that's hard to describe. It was neither anger nor satisfaction nor pain. It was freedom. Thibault died 3 days later. No signs of violence. He simply didn't wake up. Madame Eugenie ordered the coverlet to be burned, but everyone who tried to touch it said it gave off a coldness like the earth in a graveyard. In the end, the fabric was sewn into Thibault's coffin, as if hoping to seal the curse along with the body. Amara kept living, but she never wove again. The workshop closed. Zélie disappeared. Some said she fled north. Others whispered she became the new witch of the Bayou. And one night, at the place of the old tree where Lily was found, 7 fireflies lit up, glowing even under the rain. You won't find this story in textbooks. They won't tell it on tours of old Louisiana plantations. But if you ever find yourself by the Bayou Teche wetlands and hear someone singing without words among the branches in the dark, don't look toward the sound. That's Amara, and she remembers